New Zealand was once seen as one of the world's most attainable places to build a life. Today, it has become one of the world's least affordable places to buy a home. Then something unusual happened. Instead of introducing a massive housing subsidy, New Zealand changed the rules of how cities could grow. Did it work? This is the Anglosphere economy. Episode 3, New Zealand. Begin with how bad it actually got. By the early 2020s, New Zealand's house price-to-income ratio had risen 126% since 1994, according to OECD data, the sharpest rise of any comparable developed economy. Auckland became one of the least affordable cities in the OECD, with a median house price reaching roughly 10 to 11 times median household income. The causes were the familiar Anglosphere mix. Interest rates fell to historic lows after the global financial crisis. Net migration added over 100,000 people a year at points between 2022 and 2024. And for decades before either factor, restrictive planning rules had kept housing supply from responding. By the time prices peaked, New Zealand had become the Anglosphere's cautionary tale, the country where the housing crisis had gone furthest. Then in November 2016, Auckland did something few developed cities have attempted at this scale. The Auckland Unitary plan replaced a patchwork of inherited planning rules with a single unified code, upzoning approximately 3/4 of Auckland's residential land, allowing townhouses and buildings up to 6 stories near transport hubs. On maps, the change looked almost invisible. On the skyline, it would eventually reshape entire neighborhoods. 3/4 of a major city's land use rules changed at once. Did it actually increase construction? This has been studied directly, not debated abstractly. Economists at the University of Auckland compared neighborhoods where the rules changed with similar neighborhoods where they didn't. That allowed them to isolate the effect of the reform itself. Before the plan, 5.9 building consents per 1,000 residents annually. After, 9.5, a rate that outperformed New South Wales and matched Victoria. Roughly 22,000 additional homes were consented between 2016 and 2021 as a direct result. Later estimates put the full effect through 2022 at approximately 43,500 additional homes. That is not a projection. That is what has already been built. Did it lower rents? Auckland Council's chief economist, Gary Blick, summarized the follow-on research directly. Between 2017 and 2024, Auckland rents rose 22%, compared with 34% nationally. More specifically, rents for 3-bedroom homes in upzoned areas were 26 to 33% lower than they would have been without the plan. In Lower Hutt, a smaller city that upzoned even more extensively, building permits tripled and rents fell 21% relative to their prior path. Precision matters here. Auckland did not become affordable. Blick himself says so. We have a long way to go yet. The claim is narrower and more defensible. Prices and rents were measurably lower than they would have been without reform. That is a different claim than solved, and a significant one nonetheless. Now the national picture, because Auckland's experience did not alone fix New Zealand. As of 2026, the national median house price sits at approximately $750,000, roughly 8 times median household income. By international standards, still severely unaffordable. The Reserve Bank cut its cash rate from 5.5 to roughly 3.5% through 2025 into 2026. Cheaper credit already renewing price growth, with banks forecasting 2 to 5% increases through the year. Zoning reform changed the supply side of the equation. It did not remove the demand side. That is the central tension this documentary holds honestly. Reforms to the Resource Management Act, New Zealand's foundational planning law since 1991, are currently underway, aimed at further easing supply constraints. Whether they match the 2016 plan's impact remains unestablished, in progress as this is produced. How does this compare with the Anglosphere? Australia's price-to-income ratio rose similarly, without zoning reform at anything close to Auckland's scale. Britain's Greenbelt constrains supply through a different mechanism entirely, an outward boundary, not an internal density code. Research suggests English housing would be 35% cheaper without it, a finding directionally consistent with Auckland's result. Canada has seen persistent price growth without a comparable single intervention. Japan is the sharpest contrast, a permissive buy-right planning system that let its price-to-income ratio fall 25% since 1994. Singapore builds most housing directly through the state. New Zealand's approach, large-scale upzoning within a private market, sits between all of these. The skeptics' challenge: was immigration the bigger issue? The comparison method controlled for this directly. Upzoned and non-upzoned areas faced identical migration conditions and still showed a substantial zoning effect. Migration and planning constraints operated together. One doesn't explain away the other. Did cheap credit matter more? Both matter simultaneously. Credit determines how much buyers can bid. Zoning determines how much new supply can absorb that bidding. Has reform gone far enough? By Blick's own account, no. Did reform simply arrive as prices were already correcting? The comparison method directly addresses this, since both area types face the identical national cycle at the identical time. Could infrastructure become the next bottleneck? A genuine forward-looking concern, water, transport, and power must expand alongside density, and infrastructure funding reform has received less attention than zoning itself. Can Britain, Australia, or Canada simply copy this? Not directly. Auckland succeeded partly because reform was comprehensive and unified, not contested suburb by suburb. Britain's Greenbelt is a different mechanism entirely. Australia and Canada divide planning authority differently. What transfers isn't the specific instrument. What transfers is the principle. Land use reform, at sufficient scale, measurably increases supply and reduces prices relative to the counterfactual, even when it cannot, alone, deliver full affordability against falling rates and continued population growth. New Zealand became a warning for every English-speaking economy. Then it became a laboratory. The experiment is still unfolding. National affordability remains severely stretched. Interest rate cuts are already renewing the pressure supply reform alone cannot fully offset. But Auckland's consents rose. Rents in upzoned areas were measurably lower than the counterfactual. Lower Hutt, at even greater scale, produced an even larger effect. Cities are built over generations. So are housing crises. That means the true success or failure of New Zealand's experiment won't be measured in months, but in decades. If the reform succeeds over the longer run, the lessons may extend far beyond Auckland. If it doesn't, the Anglosphere may need an entirely different model for how its cities grow. I am the Anglosphere Report, connecting the stories shaping the Anglosphere and the world. If New Zealand's evidence is this strong, why have Britain, Australia, and Canada been so much slower to attempt anything like it?